Aloha y'all, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to a review that I am beyond excited to do. I've actually been really pleased with the reviews that I've been doing for y'all with this low buy going on in 2020. Because with the low buy, I have been so much more selective. It used to be like a new something would come out and I'd be like, I gotta review it. And now I'm just being so much more particular with the things that I want to review. It's just been, I don't know, I've just been really enjoying the things that I've got to review and I've been really pleased. So today we are reviewing the Melt Cosmetics Rust Palette. Now I know that this is like the next incarnation of their Rust stack, which was a very cult favorite. And when they teased this, a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, are they bringing that stack back? And then they revealed that it was a palette, which honestly, if it had been a stack, I probably wouldn't have purchased it, simply because their stacks are a little bit more cumbersome, a little bit, you know, just not as viable for me and my makeup whatevers. But y'all know that I love me a Melt Cosmetics palette, and you open it up, and for me, not being a big, heavy, neutral lover, this is pretty much exactly everything I could want in a neutral palette, let me tell you. This Erode shade right here is basically everything to me. It is just this absolutely amazing, like orangey, yellowy, mustard magnolia color. I mean, y'all would remember I bought that lipstick from Kat Von D that was this shade, and I'm kind of sad that I returned it. I returned those lipsticks because I bought them and I was like, oh, I'm gonna wear the shiz out of them because the colors are beautiful. And then they literally sat there for like 2 weeks and I didn't use them. I'm like, if you haven't reached for them in 2 weeks, they need to go back. But just this shade is so stinking beautiful. So this is my kind of jam when it comes to neutrals. It is what I am wearing on my magnificently neutral peepers today. We started off in the antique shade right here, which is this beautiful like peachiness. And then I did go into the Erode right here because I had to. Then we went into Rust right here, and then we finally deepened it up with the Mar. I did actually go for a shimmer in the ColourPop Orangey Glad palette. And then my end corner was from the ColourPop, the Peach Perfect one, I believe. Because while I love the matte to shimmer ratio on these palettes, you only get 3 shimmers, and you know mattes get me going in all sorts of ways. The mattes, I mean the shimmers are relatively dark, and I'm pretty, I don't want to say basic, but whenever I do my makeup, traditionally I do the dark out here and then the shimmy shiny all up in here, so I like sort of a lighter shimmer. But you got this palette going on here. I believe it is not limited edition, which made a lot of people happy because like I said, this is based off of a very cult favorite product. And so to have it not be limited edition is pretty great. It is gonna run you the $58 mark because Melt's palettes, Melt's eyeshadows, even their stacks and everything else like their lipsticks and their blushes and their highlighters are kind of like just typical high-end prices compared to other brands, but their eyeshadows do run a higher premium price, which typically I'm okay with because like the Gemini and the 27 palette and the neon one, those are some of my favorites. But then you had stuff like the Millennial Pinks one, and then the Mar, and then that one that was exclusive to Sephora. You know, those I felt were a little bit because the quality was kind of hit and miss. But enough chit chat, let's just get into swatching this bad boy, and then we'll get into talking about it. Like always, if I'm swatching, I'm wearing long sleeves, but behold, they fold back. So we got lots of naked pasty arm going on here. Gonna start off with Classic, which is gonna be that, you know, typical satin shade. I am happy that it isn't just like a white. It is gonna, for someone who's pasty, it is gonna offer a little bit of color, a little bit of depth, but nothing that's super crazy. I do wish they had something that was a little bit darker. You know, I am not a fan of the faint setting, whatever, blending out shades. Then Antique, which is just, oh, this is so pretty. Powdery, Melt Cosmetics shadows are notoriously powdery. As much as I love their formulas, especially their matte ones, I mean, that is hurkin' pigmented. I would not say that they are a beginner-friendly formula just because they're so powdery and you are dealing with a lot of fallout. Then we have Erode, which is just oh my goodness. I would, if this whole palette was shiz and this shadow was like the only one that was good, I would keep it for this shade because that is just so stunning, so unique, so gorgeous. I am living for that shade. I need to take that shade all over my lid. Eyeliner, I've got a sweater that is that exact same color, and we need to live for a monochromatic mustardy look. Next up is Rubbish right here, which is another, I love when Melt does neutrals because what makes them such a unique brand is that they do neutrals that are sort of an out-of-the-box color story. Because you see, that's a brown, but it's got kind of that peachy, orangey, almost olivey undertone, which makes it a neutral that's a bit more out of the box than, you know, we'd say Too Faced Chocolate Bar or Urban Decay Naked Palettes or even KVD Light Shade and Light palette. Then our first shimmer is Tarnish, all up in here. Beautiful. Y'all know that when Melt Cosmetics does their shimmer formula right, I am all about that shiz. She's smooth, she beautiful, she pigmented. Then Rust here, which is again, like I said, y'all know your girl is not that neutral person. I don't know how many times I can say it. And so when a brand comes out with a neutral palette that just skirts on the edge of being a little bit more alternative, it gets me feeling all kind of whatevers in my whatevers. And I mean, heckin' pigmented. I mean, the beauty of these swatches alone. Then Redox, I want to say, or maybe it's French, and so it's Rida, I don't know. I am not fancy, I am not cultured, but once again, they do it all nicey nice. She's smooth. I mean, look at the shine on that shiz. Look at that. Look at the reflection. You can see yourself all up in that shimmer. Then Mar right here. I hope I've got that all up in frame. The mattes are very typical. Melt doesn't have like the smoothest formula, like when you're dipping your finger into a Viseart or you're dipping your finger into like a Natasha Denona or a Midas Cosmetics. You know, those feel like butter, like silk. The Melt Cosmetics don't feel like that, but they are an absolutely beautiful formula when they are done right. I mean, look at that is opacity to the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th power. Then our last shimmer here is Ravage, which is probably the least smooth feeling out of the whole kit and caboodle going on. And probably the most kind of faint, the most kind of, you know, just a little bit there, nowhere near as cha-cha-cha-cha as this or this one. It's kind of like throw that over a matte shade to give a little bit of dimension, not so much as on its own. Then last but not least is Rot 2, Rot 2.0. I'm filming. Then why'd you ask? That was my nephew at the double door, whatever's over here. But you see, that's what it's called, Rot 2. So I'm not sure what kind of inference that is. Probably some kind of fancy antiquiness. Got that going. And for being as dark and as depth and whatever it is, it feels beautifully smooth. And can we just get a moment? I'll barely tip the tip of my finger all up in that, and that is what we get. I mean, these right here are what swatch dreams are made of. This is how, for the sake of swatching, I understand swatching does not tell all, as I have learned. But if you are trying to get the all kinds of whatevers in the swatch, this is how we wish every product would swatch, just for the fact of opacity. So here we have the beautiful rustic sort of situation. Once again, like I say, that matte to shimmer ratio is all up in my whatevers. I love that. I mean, that shade, that shade. I don't think that the only shade that I'm kind of about is this shimmer here that wasn't necessarily the most impressive, but all the mattes. I mean, for the mattes alone, I would keep this shiz just for that. Okay, I feel like this goes without saying, if y'all couldn't tell while I was doing all my swatchiness, I absolutely love this. If this quality had been what I got in that Millennial Pinks disaster of a palette, I would have been totally fine and kept that shiz. If the shimmers had performed in such a beautiful, opaque, and smooth sort of formula, I would have been 110% fine. Now, like I said, one thing to note and be very aware of when it comes to melt matte shadows is the falloutiness, is the powderiness. You get a lot. It's kind of like the way that Lorac is in their original, the Pro palettes. You get a lot of pigment. You get a lot of color for your money, a lot of bang for your buck. But you are also battling with the powderiness, the falloutiness, you know, as I'm doing my tapping thing, you know, we got the fallout all up in here. Which is why I wouldn't say that Melt Cosmetics is necessarily the best or the most beginner-friendly formula, because dealing with the powderiness and the whatever, that's a headache and that's a frustration for someone who's seasoned and well into the eyeshadow game. But typically what I do whenever I have that sort of situation, I kind of do my brush in sort of like a this motion. I don't pull it along like this. I do that to sort of create a little bit of that powder getup, and then I just tap and get that excess on my brush. And that's how I like to work with most eyeshadows, especially one that are a bit more powdery, a bit more heck and pigmented. I'm anal about a lot of things, but when it comes to my makeup application, I'm really anal. I like to know how much product I'm using. I like to know where it's going. You know, I don't do the typical, you know how they're like, blend it into your crease, and they're just blended all kinds of crazy back and forth. No, I'm very like, put, blend, put, blend. So I don't have a difficulty working with that, but that is definitely something to take into consideration. Now that aside, these are heckin' pigmented. Y'all saw on the swatches, they are so smooth, so buttery, so opaque, just absolutely stunning. And you get a lot of pigment, like you just kind of like kiss it in there, la la la. You get a little titchy bit of pigment, not a little, you get a lot of pigment, but you get just a titchy bit of eyeshadow and a lot of pigment. And that pigment, God bless it be, blends like a dream, because some heckin' pigment, whatever, you put it on there and then you're like, come on, I'd like you to blend a little bit. And it's like, no, I'm gonna stay right where you put me. These are just, the mattes are so beautiful. It is Gemini quality. It is 27 quality, like I keep saying, smooth, buttery, pigmented, blendable. I am so happy that this falls under the same quality as Gemini and 27, because the mattes of that Melt Cosmetics, part of what made them so stand out when the Gemini came out, not just because the Gemini was a super unique color story, but also because they had such a beautiful, high quality formula. So you take the crazy color story and then you put it with a formula that's bomb diggity, and it's like, yes, please and thank you. Like, this formula definitely surpasses Too Faced, definitely surpasses Urban Decay, surpasses KVD. In certain aspects, it passes Anastasia, depending on the palette you get. That is just a remarkable, beautiful formula. Now, one thing I did want to comment on is you've got this palette going on here, and then we've got the Gemini right here. Let me see if I can do this. So you can see some similarities going on here. You know, if you already have the Gemini palette, you probably don't need the Rust one. The Gemini is a little bit more subdued. It's a little bit deeper. You can see these like orangey, that like marigold shade than the Gemini palette. It's a little bit less bright, a little bit less intense. And then next up here is the 27 palette, which doesn't have as many overlaps. I feel like this Moonchild shade here is very similar to Mar. We've got Thick, which is kind of similar to Rust. We've got Whiskey Neat, you know, some sort of overlapping themes going on here. So I think it's very important before purchasing a palette to sort of look into what you already have. So if you already have these two, which is funny because I already have these two. Do as I say, not as I do. You probably don't necessarily need this one, but even that being said, this is an absolutely stunning palette, especially if you don't have either the Gemini or the 27, or you're looking at all three of them being like, what one do I get? I can stand by the quality of this one. It is absolutely beautiful. The same fantastic experience that I get with these. I'm so happy that they, for some reason, went back to their traditional amazing formula for this palette, because it has just been a beautiful experience. And thanks to Melt, I've got a myriad of beautiful, just like neutrally amazing grungy shades. I believe I have a review on this one. I don't think this one. I will leave whatever reviews I have down below, so if you are deciding which one to get, you can kind of get a more in-depth idea, you know, with that video. But all in all, absolutely not upset. If you've been thinking about getting it, you've been on the fence, you're concerned about the quality or the whatever, go out and buy this shiz. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I know I'm going to be reaching for this a lot. And after kind of looking and psychoanalyzing my collection after getting this, I think there are some other neutral palettes that I can actually get rid of, because I have this and the Gemini and the 27 in my collection. So y'all are probably going to see some more decluttering from me in the near future, because I am trying to be so much more conscious of what I have in my collection and what I love and what I use. Because if I'm reaching for this and I got something, you know, like the Urban Decay Naked palettes, why am I holding on to them being like, well, they're a collection, they're an OG. You know, they can be an OG all they want, but if I'm not reaching for it, there is literally no point in it taking up real estate in my collection. So yeah, this be bomb diggity. I would say this is something, go out and get it. You know, you've been whatever, and this I think is a beautiful, amazing palette, and it's probably going to be one of my top products for 2020. A complete turnaround from that Millennial Pinks disaster. I just think that was not a cute look. But there we have that review. I am honestly beyond so happy, because I've had the last couple of Melt releases haven't really done it for me, so I was like, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it was beautiful. It was sublime, an absolutely perfect experience. Just take into consideration the powderiness and the fact that these things are heckin' pigmented, and you need to tread softly. You start out with a little bit instead of a lot. Think of it sort of in the sense of like the Laura Geller baked blushes, where you just want to kiss. You just want a titchy bit, because for that titchy bit, you get a lot of bang. Obviously, I'd love to hear what y'all have to say about this. I know a couple of y'all were like, I bought that shiz. I jumped on that bandwagon. I think a lot of people did. But thank you guys so much for watching. I love you. And as always, keep it real. Mwah!